do you live on fresh air?
Everybody lives on fresh air.
So do you take food?
I've been known to over the last 6 years. It gets really boring not eating sometimes. But do I need food to live? No.
Believe it or not, some people believe you don't actually need food to survive, not just for a few days and not as a spiritual fast or with a planned end date, but permanently, forever. The idea is that with enough spiritual development, a human being can simply stop needing to eat. That air, sunlight, and what practitioners call life force energy can replace every calorie, every nutrient, every sip of water the body has ever required. People have built entire movements around this idea. They've written books, charged thousands of dollars to teach it, and people, real people with families and jobs and diaries full of ordinary entries, have died following it. Welcome to Scareful Stories. If you like real stories that feel a little off, a little unsettling, you're in the right place. If you're coming back to the channel, welcome back. I'd really appreciate it if you left a comment or even just liked the video. It really helps the channel out. This is the story of Breatharianism. The formal name is Inedia, from the Latin word for fasting. The belief rests on a concept called prana, a Sanskrit term meaning vital life force. In the Hindu, Buddhist, and Taoist traditions, prana is the energy that moves along all living things. It's present in the air, in sunlight, in water. Breatharians take this spiritual concept and extend it into a literal claim that the body, properly attuned, can draw everything it needs from prana alone. No food and sometimes no water is even needed. And here's what makes this belief so persistent, is that it doesn't just come out of nowhere. It has centuries of religious history attached to it. A 15th century Swiss hermit known as Brother Klaus was said to have lived the final 20 years of his life consuming nothing but the Eucharist, and according to followers, divine light. He was canonized as a Catholic saint in 1947. A German Catholic mystic named Therese Neumann reportedly went more than 30 years without food in the early 20th century, subsisting only on communion wafers. Accounts like these appear across different cultures and centuries: Hindu yogis, Buddhist monks, Christian saints, and they form a kind of sacred lineage that modern breatharians point to as proof of this concept. If holy figures throughout history could do it, the reasoning goes, then maybe it's possible. Maybe it's even the natural endpoint of spiritual evolution. And that framing is really important because it means that when someone comes along and says they've figured out how to teach it for a price, they're not just selling a diet. They're selling access to some ancient wisdom, something sacred, something that, if it worked, would make you more than human. In America, the modern version of this idea has a specific origin point: a man named Wiley Brooks. In 1980, one of the best years ever, Brooks appeared on a television show called That's Incredible. If you've never seen this show, if you are not a kid of the 80s, this was, I'm not going to say it was an incredible show because, hey, that's in the title.
Tonight on That's Incredible.
But I can remember as a kid loving this show where they just did little vignettes of people who did incredible things. So back to the story. That's Incredible was a variety program that aired stunts and curiosities to a national audience. Brooks claimed that he hadn't eaten solid food in nearly 20 years. To demonstrate his vitality, despite having not eaten anything, he lifted enormous weights. He was lean, energetic, and completely convincing. He told the audience that hunger wasn't a biological drive. It was merely a belief. It was a conditioned response, and that if you could change that belief, the body would follow. Shortly after the show, he set up the Breatharian Institute in Marin County, California. This was the New Age era, a cultural moment when Eastern spirituality, self-help philosophy, and the idea of human potential were all colliding in California. Brooks charged $10 a lecture, $100 for a day-long seminar, $500 for a 5-day intensive. He built a following of around 400 people. He told them that hunger was an addiction, like any other addiction, and that meditation and proper breathing could help them kick it. He also told them that hunger strikers, people who starved themselves to death in protest, didn't actually die from starvation. They died because they wanted to. The body, he insisted, only failed when the mind gave up first. Then, in 1983, someone spotted him at a 7-Eleven, Slurpee, Twinkies, and hot dog in hand. That someone turned out to be his co-founder, a woman named Lavelle Leffler, who believed in Brooks so deeply that she had given him her personal office to use as the Institute's headquarters. She said she caught him eating an omelet one day when he thought no one was watching. Then she saw it again and again. She eventually went to the press. She told reporters that Brooks would wait until everyone was asleep before slipping out to fast food places and 7-Elevens, because those were the only places open late enough for him to get something to eat. 12 of the Institute's 15 officers resigned along with her. Brooks's response to Lavelle's allegation was to call her a jilted ex-lover out for revenge, and he insisted, with a straight face, that he only visited 7-Elevens to buy magazines. You guys remember magazines. They were like little comic books that you could look through. Nobody buys magazines anymore. You'd expect that to be the end of it, right? You'd expect that a guy getting caught at a 7-Eleven who said he hadn't eaten in decades, but he had, a hot dog in hand, that would kind of end the breatharian movement in the United States. The leader was caught lying, and the organization was collapsing, and followers were scattering. And yet, that wasn't the end of it. Brooks simply rewrote the doctrine. If he was eating, it wasn't because the teaching was wrong. It was because the modern world had made pure breatharianism impossible. He invented new obstacles such as people pollution or electropollution and food pollution. These were forces in the environment that disrupted the body's ability to absorb prana. And when he was later caught eating McDonald's, that got folded into his philosophy too. He began teaching that McDonald's locations were built on fifth-dimensional energy portals, that Diet Coke was liquid light, and that the double quarter pounder with cheese was spiritually compatible with higher consciousness living. Because cows, he explained, were fifth-dimensional beings converting lower frequency matter into something elevated. Now, I just cannot fathom a world in which anybody believes this. I can't fathom a world in which people who really love double quarter pounders with cheese glom onto this idea that they are somehow spiritually enlightened by eating them. And I know tons of women in the 80s who didn't necessarily think Diet Coke was liquid light, but that Tab was liquid light, my mother being one of those. Brooks listed prices for his later workshops ranging from $100,000 to, and this is not a typo, $50 billion. He billed it as a limited time offer exclusively for billionaires to learn all about enlightened spirituality through not eating or eating at McDonald's. In his final years, Brooks quietly acknowledged that he had never actually stopped needing to eat. He said that he was still working on understanding why. I can imagine why. It's called science. He died in 2016 at the age of 80, and the movement, though, did not die with him. An Australian woman named Ellen Grieve had been watching Brooks. She had a background in finance. She was organized, disciplined, and really good with systems. And in the early 1990s, she began combining those talents with New Age spirituality. She changed her name to Jasmolene and started teaching workshops on meditation and inner development. By the mid-1990s, she had found breatharianism, and something clicked. Whereas Brooks had been charismatic but sloppy, Jasmolene was meticulous. She built a very structured program, a 21-day process that gradually reduced a person's intake from food to liquids to nothing. She framed it not as starvation, but as a spiritual upgrade. The body was learning how to access a higher form of nourishment. She claimed to have not eaten almost anything herself since 1993. She wrote books, she recorded audio programs, she held retreats across Europe, Asia, and Australia. She sold seminars for upwards of 1,500 pounds a ticket. She claimed thousands of followers worldwide. When journalists visited her Brisbane home, they found a refrigerator stocked with food. She said it was for her husband and her daughter. And one kind of wonders, why would you be following somebody whose own husband and daughter didn't follow her teachings? That always struck me as a little odd. Like, I don't know that I'm following somebody who claims to have found this spiritual enlightenment, but her own husband and daughter haven't found that. What Jasmolene understood, though, was perhaps better than anyone before her, was the power of a closed information loop. Her seminars weren't just instructive, they were immersive. Followers were surrounded by people who shared the same beliefs, who spoke the same language, who reinforced each other's commitment. Doctors were dismissed as operating within a limited materialist framework. Scientists couldn't measure spiritual energy. Skeptics were people who simply hadn't evolved far enough to understand the ideas. If a follower had any doubts, those doubts were reframed as the ego resisting growth. If someone struggled during the 21-day process, and really, who wouldn't, the community would counsel them to go deeper and not to stop. The financial pressure was constant. There were retreats and books and recordings and follow-up sessions. One follower or another was always being asked to invest more. And leaving, really leaving, meant abandoning not just a practice, but your entire identity. You were leaving a community, and you were leaving behind a vision of yourself as someone who is spiritually advanced enough to transcend ordinary human need. In 1999, the Australian version of 60 Minutes decided to test her claims directly. They monitored Jasmolene continuously and posted a guard and gave her 1 full week. After 48 hours, she was showing signs of severe dehydration and elevated blood pressure. She blamed the hotel's proximity to a busy road. The pollution, she said, and this goes right back to Brooks with how he brought in pollution as a reason why he needed to eat. She said that the pollution from the busy road was interfering with her ability to absorb nutrients from the air. The production then moved her to a quiet mountain retreat. Her condition kept deteriorating. By day 4, the supervising physician reported her pulse had roughly doubled and she was approaching kidney failure, so the test was stopped. Jasmolene's response was that they ended it because they were afraid she would succeed, and her followers believed her, and some followed her to their own deaths. And that's where this story really becomes really difficult. In 1997, a 31-year-old kindergarten teacher named Timu Dajan came across Jasmolene's teachings online. He attempted the 21-day process. By day 12, he was reporting visual disturbances. A week after that, he slipped into a coma. A hospital spokesperson described his condition as almost total circulatory system collapse, and she said it looked as though he'd been in a concentration camp. He was put on intravenous drips for 4 weeks, and he recovered, but then he fell and died from a head injury shortly after his release. So although his death is not directly from the 21-day fasting process, or really stop eating process, one could argue that if he had never been in the coma, if he had never had to come out of the coma and try to recover, he may have never fallen and ended up dying from the head injury. I guess one will never know if any of that contributed to how he actually died. The following year, in 1998, a 53-year-old woman named Lonnie Morris traveled to attempt the process under supervision of 2 breatharian believers. Within a week, she had suffered a stroke. She lost the use of her right arm, lost the ability to speak, and began vomiting a dark, tar-like substance. Her caregivers, however, did not call for medical help. They believed she was simply going through a difficult stage of transition. By the time an ambulance arrived, it was too late. The couple supervising her were convicted of manslaughter. And you really have to wonder about this. The couple who claimed to be breatharians and they were supervising her, you know they hadn't stopped eating. Like these other people, like Jasmolene and Brooks, were sneaking food, and yet they were encouraging poor Lonnie to just keep with it. And don't worry, you'll just get past this. You just need to become a little more spiritually enlightened, and you'll get through this difficult stage of transition, except that poor Lonnie transitioned into death. When asked about Lonnie Morris's death, Jasmolene said her practice was perhaps not coming from a place of integrity and did not have the right motivation, so in essence blaming the victim. The following year, a 49-year-old Australian woman named Verity Lynn traveled alone to a remote stretch of the Scottish Highlands. She brought a tent, a diary, and a copy of Jasmolene's book. Her diary entries showed that she stopped eating and drinking on September 4th. Her last entry was September 11th. A passing fisherman found her body roughly 100 yards from her tent on the shores of a loch. She had been dead for several days. In 2012, a Swiss woman named Anna Gut followed instructions from one of Jasmolene's books. She told her children everything was fine. One day they couldn't reach her by phone, and they ended up breaking down her door. The autopsy listed the cause of her death as starvation. By 2017, at least 5 deaths had been publicly linked to Jasmolene's publications and teachings. She, however, denied responsibility for each one of them. For each death, there was an explanation. The person wasn't ready, they lacked integrity, they had the wrong motivation, they were spiritually unprepared. The teaching itself was never wrong. It never could be wrong, according to Jasmolene. And that's the mechanic that's worth understanding. It's not just the belief, but the structure that's built around it. In a system like Jasmolene's, every piece of contradictory evidence gets absorbed and neutralized. Failed attempts prove that the person failed, not the method. Deaths are reframed as spiritual transitions, or as the inevitable result of someone who just wasn't ready. Medical warnings are the product of a system that just doesn't understand. Doubt is ego. Hunger is programming. The body's desperate signals, weakness, confusion, the specific kind of pain that comes from starvation, are all reinterpreted as the noise of transformation. And surrounding all of this is a community of people who have invested financially, emotionally, and spiritually in the belief being true. Leaving means more than just walking away from an idea. It means accepting that you were wrong, that the community you trusted misled you, and that the money that you spent and the time you gave and the relationships you built around this practice were built on something false. And for so many people, that's harder to face than it is to face hunger. So they stay and they keep going and they encourage others to keep going. Michelle Pfeiffer, the actress, has spoken about being drawn into a breatharian group in Los Angeles in the early 1980s when she was a very young, aspiring actress. A controlling couple, working as personal trainers, gradually moved her from vegetarianism toward breatharianism. They told her she needed to visit more. They charged her for every session they had with her. They told her that she wouldn't survive without them. She only recognized it for what it was when her then husband was researching a cult for a film role and brought her along to interview a former member. Listening to that person describe the psychological manipulation, she said, something clicked in her. She realized she was inside the exact same pattern. I was in one, she said. Sadly, the movement didn't end with Jasmolene's 60-minute test, or with the deaths, or with any of the public scrutiny. It just adapted. A California and Ecuador-based couple named Akahi Ricardo and Camila Castillo became the most visible modern face of the movement after going viral in 2017. They claim to have barely eaten in 9 years, sustaining themselves on what they called the energy of the universe. Castillo said she had practiced a breatharian pregnancy, consuming almost nothing while carrying her first child. When the backlash came, they walked it back. They acknowledged eating occasionally. They rebranded their practice as pranic living, saying the word breatharianism gave people the wrong idea. Their 8-day course costs up to $1,500. It's marketed as a wellness and consciousness program. The word starvation doesn't appear anywhere on the website, although I'm guessing their followers feel it, and neither does the word death. And that's where the movement lives now. It's dressed up in the language of wellness and biohacking and spiritual evolution. The extreme edges are softened. The 21-day program has become an 8-day process. Eliminating food entirely becomes reducing your dependence. The content lives on YouTube and on Instagram and in retreat brochures with clean fonts and sunrise photography. It finds people who are already interested in fasting and in meditation and in the idea that the body has untapped potential, and it moves them in gradually, one step and then another. And somewhere along the way, for some of them, the steps stop being metaphorical. What sticks with me about this story isn't the obvious absurdity of it, because it just really, to most people, I think, comes off as really absurd. But it's how reasonable each individual steps looks from the inside of it. Fasting has real spiritual and even physical benefits, and that's been documented. Reducing processed food is genuinely healthy. Mindfulness and breath work, community, a sense of purpose, those are real human needs as much as things like food and water. Breatharianism doesn't offer something completely alien. It offers something recognizable and then pulls it in one step further, and then another, and it does it inside a community that makes each step feel like progress rather than danger. The body, though, keeps an honest account. It doesn't adjust to belief. It doesn't care about motivation or integrity or spiritual advancement. It sends hunger signals and weakness signals and confusion and pain, and it keeps sending them, and it keeps getting louder until it just can't anymore. Verity Lynn was found with her diary beside her. The last entry was written 5 days before her body was discovered. We don't know exactly what those 5 days were like, but we can probably imagine. And that's the Scareful story of breatharianism. Until next time, stay safe, stay careful, and remember to keep breathing and keep eating. Thanks, guys.